Mystery lurks within the ground beneath our feet. Buried deep beneath the Earth's surface lies the secret world of the ancient miners. Lost and forgotten for centuries, now the true stories of their extraordinary inventions are coming to light. How did Roman Emperor Augustus create a mountainous wasteland with an underground tidal wave? Could a mythical gemstone have guided the Vikings to America? Who developed an ancient ground-penetrating radar device and then used it to target enemies with an underground superweapon made from chicken feathers? Armed with the latest technology, Ancient Discoveries is making a journey to a strange underworld. This is the untold story of ancient mining machines. It was a struggle that would claim the lives of over 9 million people in the most sacred lands on Earth. The Crusades. 195 years of war. Relentless siege and counter-siege. The deadlock broken only by a secretive and little-known conflict. The Battle Beneath. A battle led by underground special forces known as sappers.
A sap is a low-level, shallow mine which goes from outside a fortification down underneath the walls. The person who digs a sap is known as a sapper.
In 1178 AD, both Christian and Muslim sources describe a sapping mission that defies possibility. Armed with simple gardening tools, sappers are said to have destroyed the greatest fort the Holy Lands had ever seen. In October of that year, the destiny of the Middle East depended on a power struggle between two men. King Baldwin IV, a leper boy who became king aged just 13, and Saladin, Muslim warrior and veteran of 20 years of military campaigning.
Saladin, as the commander, one of the greatest warrior leaders that the Islamic world's ever seen. In contrast, Baldwin, commanding the Crusaders, was little more than a boy. His rank was there because of his status and his birth, rather than any real skill as a commander.
Against all odds, Baldwin won a victory against Saladin at the Battle of Montgisard. Buoyed by victory, he set out to construct Jacob's Ford, a fort with walls over 30 feet high and 10 feet thick. It would be the largest fort of the medieval world. But it was positioned along a geopolitical fault line. 60 miles from the Muslim capital of Damascus, guarding the lone pass between the Sea of Galilee and Lake Hula. If completed, it would allow the Crusaders to strike Damascus within 24 hours. Saladin, the great general, sought a peaceful solution.
Once he hears about the establishment of the fortress and he actually comes and witnesses what is going on here, he decides to do the greatest effort to try and avoid the conflict. And what he does is he sends a messenger and he says to Baldwin, okay, I will pay you 60,000 dinars, and all I want from you is to stop building the fortress and evacuate your forces from here and go back to Jerusalem.
His offer rejected, Saladin invested the money offered to Baldwin in arming his forces for battle. Amidst the scattered ruins of Baldwin's 800-year-old fort, archaeologist Kate Raphael has unearthed evidence of Saladin's battle plan.
When Saladin sees the width of the wall and how well it's built, he decides, rather than bombard it with his siege machines, that he will actually tunnel underneath it.
On Saturday, August 24th, in 1179 AD, Baldwin was just 100 miles away with a force of up to 4,000 battle-hardened soldiers. Time was of the essence. Saladin had to destroy the fort rapidly or risk being overwhelmed by the Crusaders' army.
We're now standing in the eastern postern of the fortress, and as Saladin was putting his sappers into work, he distributed his army and he put his best team of archers on the slope. And the idea behind this was to divert as much of the attention of the garrison away from his sappers.
The accounts suggest that they mined 100 feet a day through virtually solid rock. That's an amazing figure by any stretch. Even today we wouldn't expect that with power tools, and they did it with their bare hands. But the really exciting fact is they'd done it in only 5 days.
The tale of Saladin's sappers is legendary in underground warfare. It suggests that military miners were able to destroy one of the most formidable walls in antiquity, armed with a pick, a shovel, and a pile of wood. But are the stories to be believed? Ancient Discoveries is investigating. Former military engineer John Naylor is setting out to dig a tunnel and sap a wall just as Saladin's sappers did over 800 years ago. He is using the same tools and equipment as the original sources describe. John and his son Rob, an engineer with the British Army, begin digging the tunnel.
During this task, we've gone off the British Army Field Fortification Manual that says you can move half a cubic yard of earth per hour per man.
After 3 days of digging, these modern-day military engineers have dug a tunnel 15 feet long.
By 3/4 of a yard, and that means in 2 hours we're moving a yard down this tunnel. But that's just the digging out. There's also the same amount of work in removing the earth from the tunnel, and even the same amount of work in stacking the earth outside. So it's not just the digging. His men were covering perhaps 30 yards a day. That is 60 man-hours digging. So there must have been 2, 3, maybe 4 men up at that face at any one time hacking away.
John is now packing the end of the tunnel with combustible materials.
Well, we're at the end of the tunnel, and we've excavated a cavity, a big hole for the wall to drop into. The wall's up above me there. We're filling this cavity with wood, and we're going to throw in some fat and some oil for good measure, so we get a huge bonfire in here. The wall at the moment is supported on struts, on a support frame. So what we've done is construct a frame so that there's a cross member halfway across the tunnel, and the support's actually sitting on top of that cross member. What that means is when that cross member goes, when that burns through, falls away, the support falls, and the wall falls. That's the theory. We're going to put it to the test.
In Saladin's time, the sappers would have had 60 tons of earth and stone wall above them. They had to calculate the moment of collapse to perfection. At dawn on Thursday, August 29th, the fires were lit at Jacob's Ford. Baldwin's cavalry were rapidly approaching. Saladin's forces had just 112 hours to undermine one of the greatest walls in antiquity.
This is it, a moment of truth. Set fire to that tunnel, see if we can bring down the wall. Let's go in. That's it. Get out quick.
The flames reach approximately 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to melt steel alloys. Saladin's entire attack strategy depended upon collapsing a 3-foot wide section of wall. The destiny of the Crusades hung in the balance.
That was great. The wall's gone, it's fallen in, the tunnel's caved in on top. This has been a great experiment. It's enabled me to get an idea of what life was like for a sapper in the Middle Ages. Having said that, nobody was trying to kill me whilst I was digging this mine. It shows that if a couple of us can do this, imagine what Salah ad-Din could do with an army of thousands of men.
The original accounts describe this moment 800 years ago. The fort wall collapsed to a loud cheer from the Muslim army. Saladin's ground troops swelled forward, and Jacob's Ford was obliterated. But even Saladin's underground fires were dwarfed by a new form of underground explosion, an invention that transformed a battlefield death weapon into a mining machine able to blast through one of the world's hardest rocks. (1689 AD). Parish registers of Cornwall in England record a most shocking death. A miner is literally incinerated deep underground by a massive inferno. The culprit? Gunpowder, placed there by this very miner. An unidentified text from the time describes what happened.
The gunpowder is in an instant kindled. The expanded fluid drives before it a roaring whirlwind of flaming air which tears up everything in its path.
While no one realizes it at the time, the dead man's name will go down in history as someone who died revolutionizing the mining industry.
Thomas Epsley, the man who brought that rare invention of shooting rocks, was killed at the mine on the 16th day of December of our Lord Christ, 1689.
In Thomas Epsley's time, mining was done purely by hand. Epsley pioneered explosive mining, which would increase output in Great Britain by up to 100 times just 12 months after his death. Yet his mixture contained a fatal flaw, a flaw that has remained hidden for over 300 years. The roots of the mystery begin on the coast of Cornwall in England at Poldark, an ancient tin mine, parts of which have remained untouched for over 2,000 years. Mining historian Darren Osborne is reopening the mining case files.
Well, mining tin is hard work. It's dangerous work. You actually have to break the rock. You take the rock to surface, it's crushed, it's washed and smelted to recover the metal. The life expectancy of a miner in Poldark would be in the region of about 36. The chances of getting much older than that are fairly slim.
Tin miners of Poldark were faced with a seemingly impossible challenge: how to mine through granite, the world's fourth hardest rock, with nothing but a pole pick.
The pole pick goes at least 2,000 years back. Using the pole pick, you can go through the ground somewhere in the region of 1 inch to 3 inches a day. I mean, that is phenomenally hard work and very, very slow progress.
Miners were reduced to tunneling just 30 feet a year. Slow progress was compounded by the fact that at any moment their candle could go out.
When the candles go out, you're left in total darkness. It's complete. Not like being at night when you're outside and you can see just a few stars and you can just see the edge of the lawn. Darkness is complete. You cannot even see your hand in front of your face. You could walk around for quite a long time in what would be absolutely terrifying conditions trying to find your way out of the mine.
Into these primitive conditions stepped Thomas Epsley, a man whose innovations would later make England the workshop of the world. Epsley sought to transport the terrifying firepower of Renaissance artillery into the mines.
The gunpowder turns the mine into an enormous piece of artillery and wastes its fury in a discharge of thick clouds of dust, stones, and timber.
But Epsley faced a lethal problem: how to transform a battlefield killing machine into a material able to blast through solid granite.
Right, Thomas Epsley is not a particularly well-known character outside of mining circles, but in terms of what he did, it was quite important. He brought black powder, gunpowder to most people, into Cornish mining.
To mine with gunpowder safely, Epsley needed a method that delayed the gunpowder explosion. His solution was to transform the feathers of goose quill into a delayed detonator.
The main fuse that was used was the goose quill. And they would have a series of goose quills stacked together, filled with black powder. And when you light the end of that, it will burn at a fairly irregular rate, hopefully giving you long enough time to get away.
At Camborne Test Mine in Cornwall, Gus Chambers, a miner with over 30 years' experience, is set to carry out an experiment that will illustrate why Thomas Epsley's prototype went disastrously wrong. First, Gus needs to bar down, an ancient mining technique Thomas Epsley would himself have used to check the safety of the blast site. If the rock creates a ringing sound, it means the structure is secure. But a drumming noise means that the rock is critically unstable.
The main danger is not from the explosive that you've just blasted, it's from the physical effects on the rocks and the faults in the rocks. And you have to make sure the rock is confident, and you do that by bringing down any loose rock. And then when that's all safe, you can get on with charging the holes back up again.
The shaft cleared for blasting, Gus drills a 4-inch hole in which to place the gunpowder.
Before we can actually blast, we need a void or a hole to put the charge in. So what we're doing is drilling the holes first, and then we will charge the hole up with explosive to blast later. Another quill.
Gus and his team lay the charges in the hole, just as Thomas Epsley would have done 3 centuries before them. The team have calculated that they will have 20 seconds to clear a 100-yard blast area. Now is the moment to find out if those calculations are correct. Captured at 2,000 frames per second, the gunpowder ignites at temperatures of over 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The granite is blown to pieces, completing 6 days of work with a pole pick in just half an hour.
It was half a stick with about 1/3 of a metre of rock to blast away, and because we used high explosive in that blast, it was quite effective in throwing the rock across the drive.
But the experiment also reveals intriguing clues to Thomas Epsley's mysterious death. The goose quill fuse clearly burnt at an uneven rate, meaning that it would have been impossible for Epsley to calculate the burn time accurately.
The knowledge of the use of black powder at the time was fairly limited. It wasn't uncommon for people who were considered to be experts to end up on the wrong end of an explosion.
A sudden acceleration in the fuse burn may have caused a surprise explosion, crushing Epsley beneath up to 600 pounds of rock.
Thomas Epsley's death would have been unpleasant, that's for sure. We don't know how much powder they were letting off at any one time at that period, but you can be pretty sure that you've got an awful lot of rock flying around. So you imagine the force of rock being blasted and just cutting you to ribbons, really.
Yet how did the ancients mine when the rock was so precious that it may have underpinned the discovery of a continent? Ancient discoveries unearths evidence of the crystal that may have guided the Vikings to America. In 2001, modern-day Viking Gunnar Eggertsson traveled across the North Atlantic Ocean in an ancient Viking ship. He landed on the east coast of America to a fanfare of the world's press. He had succeeded in replicating a voyage carried out by a Viking named Leif Erikson over 1,000 years earlier.
Leif Erikson is recorded in the sagas as being the first person to discover North America 500 years before Columbus.
If these accounts are correct, Leif Erikson traveled over 1,200 miles through iceberg-strewn waters and high seas. His voyage poses a great mystery. How did the Vikings navigate? The answer may lie in a rock 10 million years old, mined by the Vikings and known as the Sunstone. In the National Archives of Reykjavik in Iceland are the Viking sagas. They describe heroic Viking deeds and journeys between 780 and 1000 AD, when Vikings dominated Europe. We know that the Vikings made use of sundials to navigate with during seagoing voyages. But what would they have done on cloudy days when the sun was obscured? One of the sagas makes a reference to a strange ability to locate the sun.
Could be considered a miracle of him, or whether or not he actually had in his possession some sort of stone or some other means of being able to locate the sun on a cloudy day.
The sunstone, or Iceland spar, is believed to have been created underground by one of the greatest forces in the natural world: volcanoes. Iceland, a country smaller than Ohio, has been responsible for 1/3 of the Earth's lava flows in the last 500 years. And it is these unique conditions that are believed to have formed the legendary calcite crystal.
The Iceland spar crystals that are found in this particular locality were deposited about 10 million years ago in a central volcano where geothermal waters circulated for about 1 million years.
As the magma cools, deep inside, air and water pockets form, which over millions of years are crushed into clear calcite crystals, or Iceland spar. As time and the elements weathered the rock, the Vikings would discover the crystals through open cast mining. So how can a crystal solve the 1,000-year-old mystery of the Vikings and their extraordinary voyages? Leading scientist Leo Christiansen is examining the sunstone.
The crystal splits up light into two rays, ordinary refraction, and the other one does strange things. It rotates with the crystal, and it's called extraordinary refraction.
The ordinary and extraordinary rays of light created by the crystal unmask a strange optical property called double refraction. Where we were expecting to see one image, we see two. Graphic scientist James Dean believes he has deciphered how the sunstone may utilize this property to navigate.
In order to understand what's going on with the sunstone, let's take a look at light itself. Here's some natural light produced by the sun, and you can see it's a mishmash of waves all superimposed on top of each other. If we introduce a filter into the middle of this, it acts very much like a grate. And we can see here that light which is oscillating in the same plane as the grate is allowed to pass through, whilst all other light is blocked. The light rays that come out the other end are known as polarized light because they're all oscillating on the same plane. So let's take a look at the sunstone that the Vikings were actually using and see how it works. The sunstone is a crystal of calcium carbonate, and it acts like a natural polarizing filter. The sunstone has the property that when light enters it, the crystal splits it into two paths of light. We have the ordinary path of light and the extraordinary path of light here. Now, when the crystal itself is aligned to the same polarization as the incoming light, then these two images will be of equal intensity, and we're oriented to the direction of the sun. And this is how the Vikings knew where the sun was, even when they couldn't directly see it. And this could be incredibly accurate. This could be to within a degree, as we'd know it, on a modern compass.
But Professor Christiansen doesn't believe the Vikings could have used the sunstone as a navigational device.
The Iceland spar crystals would have been much too complicated to use for that purpose. And this story that has been perpetuated for some decades now is just nonsense.
Ancient Discoveries is looking for answers. Gunnar Merrill Eggertsson is a direct descendant of Leif Erikson. The Viking, some believe, traveled to America. He is setting out on a seafaring journey of discovery to find out if the stories of the sunstone's mystical powers have any truth. Gunnar and his assistant are rowing out of Reykjavik into the open ocean. Iceland is less than 2,000 miles from the magnetic pole, so compasses don't work here. They will be relying on the sunstone, just as the Vikings may have, to return to a specific point in Reykjavik.
We have to be aware about the fact that they really wanted to go east or west if they were crossing the ocean. having the sun on the right corner 12 hours every day, then you are on the same latitude. That's the main rule for a Viking crossing the North Atlantic 1,000 years ago.
But on days such as today, when clouds have obscured the sun, the Vikings would need the sunstone's powers. Gunnar rotates the sunstone until the two dots are equal in intensity. Our cameras don't pick it up, but the experiment verifies the dots are there. Matching the results against known local sailing waypoints, Gunnar believes he has located the route home.
Now I'm matching a line between the dots. I think we have found the sun.
On this summer's night at 11 p.m. in Iceland, our explorers have found their way, just as Viking legend Leif Erikson may have once discovered the eastern coast of America. All from a crystal unearthed through open-cast mining. The quest for underground treasures reached its pinnacle with the Romans, a quest that would see entire mountainsides blown apart in search of gold. An alien landscape 12 miles across. Huge chasms cut up to 400 feet deep into the rock. Evidence suggests these structures were transformed very suddenly 2,000 years ago. But by whom or what remains a mystery.
What happens is far beyond the work of giants. The cracks made in the entrails of the stone are so dangerous that it would be easier to find purpurine or pearls at the bottom of the sea than make scars in the rock. How dangerous we have made the earth.
In 77 AD, Roman historian Pliny wrote of a place now called Las Medullas in northern Spain, a mine on a scale unseen in the known world.
They moved approximately 3,000 acres of earth, which is equivalent to an area of 1,200 football fields.
Archaeologist Javier Sanchez Palencia has spent a lifetime analyzing this extraordinary site for clues to the catastrophic events that unfolded here.
This is a place ridden with mystery and described by countless myths and legends since the fall of the Roman Empire. Locals have known for centuries that it was made artificially, that is, by humans, but no one could tell exactly how.
The only definite human markings in evidence are
that is, by humans, but no one could tell exactly how.
The only definite human markings in evidence are contained inside the structures themselves.
These are the marks left behind by the Roman miners who built this tunnel almost 2,000 years ago. They are intact and are the marks the miners actually made.
Only a tiny fraction of the tunnels remain. The others appear to have been obliterated around the 1st century AD by a force far greater than men with picks could ever achieve. The mastermind behind the tunnel's destruction was Emperor Augustus, a man worshipped as a living god. He instigated a technique that would become known as Ruina Montium.
The Ruina Montium literally means the collapse of the mountains. That is, the destruction of the mountains in order to obtain gold.
And this is something which is amazing to us today and was really staggering for those who lived in the Roman period. To move mountains, to physically move mountains, can only be an incredibly impressive thing. Of course, there's a dark side to this story in that hundreds of thousands died mining the gold. There were often collapses of the shafts that were created.
The secret force behind the mountain's destruction? Water. We know that Earth's canyons and valleys are formed through water erosion by rivers or rain. But this usually takes over 30 million years. So how did the Romans obliterate entire mountainsides with water in just over a century and a half? To find out, modern engineer Neil Saunders is investigating the cutting power of pressurized water on sandstone, the same rock as at Las Medulas, using the latest 21st century technology.
The water jet is a very new machine. It's very high technology, the amount of systems that control it.
Neil fires the water jet at 900 miles per hour.
Most people might think of water as a soft, drinkable material, but as we can see, at high pressure, high velocity, clean-cut stone.
The experiment proves that water can cut through rock. But how did the Romans develop such technology almost 2 millennia before this machine was invented? Archaeologists now believe that Las Medulas was once home to a 5 million gallon reservoir, fed by a network of canals longer than those that feed New York.
Roman engineers built these canals. They ran for hundreds of miles just to carry water to the central reservoir from the mountains.
The reservoir had beneath it a network of empty tunnels, specially constructed with dead ends. At the vital moment, the Romans released the sluice gates guarding the tunnel entrances, and the water rushed inside. With nowhere left for the water to go, the pressure would have built up and the mountainside exploded.
Using the force of water to mine is one of the biggest secrets of Roman technology. Using water from reservoirs and canals, they were able to generate a sufficient force of water to mine to a depth of 300 feet.
The earth, rock, and gold deposits were captured and then sifted in giant wooden trenches situated down the mountainside. Over 160 years, the Romans removed 2,500 tons of material, a weight equivalent to 10 Statues of Liberty. Using data from the actual location, computer scientist James Dean is running a simulation of Ruina Montium.
Here's our simulation of the tunnel network at Las Medulas. This is the landscape, and if we go to an X-ray view here, we can see the network of tunnels which were created by removing about 580,000 cubic yards of material. And there's lots of intricacies and twists and turns, which when we drop the water through is going to create some pressure hotspots. We've got a reservoir here which contains about 23,000 cubic yards of water, and we're going to be dropping it over a distance of about 2,000 yards. So let's kick the simulation off, and you can see the water starting to flow. And here we're measuring the amount of energy that's released. As soon as it hits a corner, we can see that there's huge amounts of pressure there. That pressure is ripping into the rock itself. If we pull back to the wider view now, we can see that the landscape has been completely devastated. The energy in our simulation is showing us about 360 billion joules of energy has been released, which is equivalent to about 10 or 11 tons of TNT.
But Roman mining machines went beyond even mountain moving. They used miners to plant bombs under Greek walls. That is, until the Greeks zeroed in on them with their own version of radar and then subjected them to a terrifying chemical weapon. An unseen enemy, tunneling beneath castle walls through fires lit underground against sappers, the military miners of the ancient world.
Now, of course, there weren't just miners on the outside. They got miners inside, and they would dig what were called counter mines. The problem is trying to find them.
Could the ancients have developed an early form of ground-penetrating radar? Hidden within accounts left by Roman historian Polybius lies a mysterious account of a sonar-like detection system. In 189 BC, Roman general Fulvius Nobilior set out to destroy the Greek city of Ambracia.
Ambracia has very, very good natural defences. It's surrounded by water, it's surrounded by hills and mountains on one side. But nonetheless, the Romans decide that they're going to take it.
Ambracia was surrounded by 2 Roman legions, totaling 8,000 troops. Catapults fired storms of bolts up to 10 feet long. Siege towers rose 5 stories into the sky. Yet still, the city didn't fall. As Roman sappers were dispatched, the Greeks turned to their military engineers for salvation.
What is really needed was some kind of device or mechanism that would aid them in finding the Roman tunnels using audible means. Now, we know the Greeks were very, very good with acoustics. We hear stories of theatres where absolutely vast areas, every single person within the theatre or stadium could hear an actor standing in the centre. And this was done by the clever use and manipulation of acoustics.
Inside the city, the Greek leaders needed to transform their acoustic mastery into a new form of military surveillance.
The leaders of the besieged set vigorously to work to dig a trench inside the wall. This they lined with exceedingly thin plates of brass. With their ears close to the plates, they listened for the noise made by the miners outside. When they had noted the spot indicated by the reverberation of the brass plates, they began to dig.
But is this astonishing account to be believed? Our trio of military engineer, modern sapper, and model maker Richard Windley are analyzing the Greek detection device.
So this is actually a little bit like a very primitive loudspeaker cone. And the important bit is then to translate the vibration from the wall onto the middle of the diaphragm, which is this very, very thin bottomed bowl here. And to do that, we've got a sound post. This is just like a shallow piece of wood. So that contacts the wall at the back and also hits the bowl absolutely in the centre, so that any vibration in the wall hopefully will be transferred to the centre of this bowl here. This should amplify the sound and hopefully we'll be able to hear it.
To test the truth of Polybius's story, Richard must first test how sound travels underground using modern technology.
So what we're really trying to do today is get a kind of qualitative idea of how well sound vibration travels through the ground. Right, Jess, there's the sensors, the ground sensors. So if you'd like to put those in position and I'll go and prepare the charge.
Okay.
Richard is preparing to detonate an underground explosion. The explosives are laid 18 inches underground to cut out any ambient sound. Richard's assistant is laying subsonar vibration detectors at intervals of 8 feet from the blast site to analyze how the strength of the audio signal changes with distance from the blast.
What we want to do when we let the charge off is to see what the rise in actual vibration level is. This will be like a pulse from the explosion, and we can then go back and see the difference between the ambient or background level and the level of the charge.
If the sonic blast's vibrations remain strong across 50 feet, then sound will have traveled underground, just as the ancient Greek sources describe.
All the meters are showing a 30 to 35 decibel increase from the charge. So really what it's proving is at sort of 50 or 60 feet, we're not getting much loss through the ground. We're proving the point that any noise that the tunnel has made should be detectable.
Back at the ancient discoveries test wall, Richard is now using the underground detection device for real. 6 feet beneath the wall, military engineer John Naylor and his son are digging a tunnel.
Can you imagine the tension when they're digging away, fearful that every little sound is going to give away their position to the enemy up above?
Richard is able to zero in on the sapper's position.
We're definitely hearing a ringing noise here. There would be a series of these probably about every 4 feet or something like that, and by listening to each one in turn, they'd be able to locate roughly where the sound was coming from.
Now, the miners on the inside, if they can find out where the sap is, they can make a little hole and they can start to drop nasty things in there.
Anti-sapper techniques included flooding the tunnels with water or angry bees. But to save their city, the Ambracians needed something yet more terrifying, an ancient form of chemical warfare.
Then they do something which is really, really clever. The Ambracians pack a casket full of feathers, the kind of lightest, sweetest, softest thing that you can imagine, and they attach an iron pipe to the end of the cask. And then they set light to the feathers.
Can these strange descriptions possibly be true? Richard is about to find out. He has built a replica of the ancient Ambracians' smoke machine.
Basically what we've got is an enormous pot with a lid, and what they would do is they would fill this with sort of all sorts of noxious burning substances. What they normally quote as being used was a mixture of feathers and charcoal, but it's also quite likely they would have mixed substances like sulfur and possibly toxic plants. So once all these substances were sort of burning reasonably effectively, the whole device would be dropped face down into their counter tunnel, and a tube coming out of the back of the pot would be connected to a pair of bronze-smith's bellows, which is what we've got here. Now, by pumping these bellows, they were hoping it would actually blow down into the tunnels which the Romans had already dug.
The ancient smoke machine has been taken to a fire brigade test center. Here, a barrage of high-tech experiments will unmask its true effectiveness.
So really this is one of the mysteries of ancient history as to whether this device really was effective. So what we're going to do today is a scientific test and find out what kind of substances are actually being produced by these smouldering feathers. We're assuming we're going to get all sorts of noxious compounds, but whether these are actually completely toxic or whether they're just unpleasant, we really need to find out.
Unlike the ancient Roman sappers, the firemen will be using full breathing apparatus and safety gear, as the lethality level is unknown.
This could be very toxic smoke. I'm not sure how long it would take to kill someone until we actually see it. I suspect it'd probably take a reasonable time for you to become unconscious or for it to kill you.
Fire trainers Phil Howard and Alan Turvey are taking a journey back almost 2,000 years to discover whether a simple mixture of charcoal, sulfur, and chicken feathers has the power to halt the siege of a giant ancient city. Using a state-of-the-art gas toxicity reader, Phil can unmask the molecular fingerprint of the gases given off by the smoke machine.
Well, initially, until the bellows were really being used, I was unimpressed, but as soon as the bellows start to be used, visibility was rapidly becoming poorer and poorer. It's hard to find your way out. You have to use the walls to find your way out. You couldn't see a hand in front of your face. It was very impressive, very effective.
Now the readings must be analyzed to discover whether Polybius's original descriptions of lethal compounds are correct.
The concentrations we measured with the GasMet today certainly surprised me. I would have expected CO and CO2 as being normal products of combustion, but the high ammonia concentration is something that I wasn't expecting. We're recording levels that would render somebody incapable of breathing within seconds.
The lethal ammonia was created out of protein strands in the chicken feathers. High concentrations can lead to encephalopathy, disease of the brain, followed by death. Ambracia fell 3 months later, but so impressed were the Romans with the Greeks' inventions that everyone in the city was spared. The true extent of which ancient underground inventions have been lost to time can never be known, but the clues that remain, from devastated mountainsides to supernatural crystals, unveil an extraordinary world of subterranean technology. Every car, every structure or work of engineering today builds on the intrepid journey of discovery, which began with history's first miners.